Hi, I'm Jimmy. In this video, we're looking at the story of Intel. So in tech, giants don't topple overnight, but instead they gradually drift lower. So here's the story of Intel, how they climbed to the top of Silicon Valley, slipped, and what looks like it's coming next. So the year is 1968, and the Santa Clara Valley is more orchards than it is offices. Two engineers, Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore, founded Intel to build memory chips. Then, a few years later, in 1971, Intel unveils the 4004, the first commercial microprocessor, a programmable brain on a sliver of silicon about the size of your fingernail. It's tiny and it changes everything. Then, in 1981, the PC era erupts. IBM chooses the Intel 8088 for the original IBM personal computer, and Intel's x86 design becomes the industry standard. Then in 1985, Intel exited the difficult-to-compete-in memory business to focus solely on microprocessors. This involved a bunch of painful layoffs and ultimately was declared a bold pivot for the company. Under the CEO at that time, Andy Grove, well, he said, only the paranoid survive. And Intel became America's chip linchpin. All their other rivals really struggled to keep up with what Intel was bringing to the table. Then in 1991, Intel created a marketing campaign that they called Intel Inside. Suddenly, the ingredient, the chip, becomes the brand that people were asking for. You knew if that Intel Inside chip was on your computer, it was good, it was reliable, and it was fast. Then in 1993, they landed the Pentium chip. This is faster, sleeker, and it was everywhere. Windows computers were carrying Intel chips pretty much on everything. They called it Wintel, and this dominates the 1990s. Then in 1999, Intel joins the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and this company is a household name, and it's a market bellwether. It's one of the big companies of that time. Then in the early part of the year 2000, the dot-com euphoria kind of peaks out, and Intel is near the summit of corporate America. PCs, servers, networking chips, they were seemingly unstoppable. Everything that they were doing was running on all cylinders. But even at the top, cracks began to form. By the mid-2000s, AMD's Athlon 64 snags the performance crown for a short period of time, and Intel ended up bouncing back with their Core 2 Duo in 2006, but it looks like a fight might be on. Then in 2007, the world shifts to your pocket. Apple, at that time, asked Intel to power the first iPhone. Intel passed because the CEO didn't believe that the mobile phone market was going to be big enough. The iPhone takes off on the ARM structure of chip design, and mobile is a massive wave that Intel ends up missing out on. Then in the 2010s, Intel runs into another headwind, what's called Intel's manufacturing problems. So for decades, Intel's superpower was designing and building the world's best chips. They designed them, they built them, they did it all themselves. Well, as they were trying to come up with the next generation of chips, the 10 nanometer chips, well, their plans stumbled. In the meantime, competitors like Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC for short, well, they start utilizing tools like extreme ultraviolet technology. And Intel passes on extreme ultraviolet because they didn't think that EUV technology was going to work out. Well, this is another major miss for Intel because EUV became the next generation. Then in 2017, AMD's Ryzen, their Zen technology, well, it brings multi-core muscle at prices that were better than Intel's. And suddenly, data centers and PC enthusiasts had real choices. You didn't have to just go with Intel. Ryzen was doing well compared to the Intel chips. Meanwhile, a quiet revolution was also beginning with GPUs, which is a graphics processing unit. And this becomes real important as AI begins to roll out. But NVIDIA at that time was producing graphics processing cards. Intel had long focused on integrated graphics processing, graphics cards, but they missed the boat on this. A graphics processing unit turned out was better. Then in 2019, late 2019, Intel jumped out and bought Habana Labs to chase AI accelerators. An important step, but NVIDIA already had a huge start. Then in 2020, well, the PC market sees a big pandemic boom, And this lifts revenue for Intel. But this comes with some bad news, as Apple announced that their Mac computers were transitioning away from Intel chips to Apple's own M1 chips. And these M1 chips are fantastic for both performance, but also for the amount of power that they draw. Now, this was a shot not just to their revenue, their bottom line. It wasn't just the fact that they were losing this revenue that they were once getting with Apple, but it was also a shot to their prestige. Ultimately, Apple was saying that the best chips that Intel has was not as good as what they were producing now. That was a big shot. Then in 2021, Intel brings back their engineer CEO, Pat Gelsinger, and he comes up with this plan, what they called IDM 2.0. He recommits to building chips and opening Intel's fabs to outside customers. He maps an aggressive plan for Intel to go from the 7 to the 4 to the 3 nanometer chips, from 20A to 18A. Basically, they were talking, here's our plan to get back to the leadership, and we have the best chips. Well, 2022, 2023, those are some hard years. PC demand cooled a little bit coming out of the pandemic. AI, on the other hand, absolutely takes off. And once again, Intel was left behind as companies like NVIDIA and AMD and Taiwan Semiconductor were claiming the lead. Well, then in 2024, you had some big headlines come out for Intel. First, Intel got a bit over $10 billion, it's about $10.9 billion from the CHIPS Act. Ultimately, this was funding that would go to support new manufacturing plants for them in Arizona, Ohio, New Mexico, Oregon, but they had strict milestones tied to them. And as they were going to build out these plants, which will, by the way, take years to build out, NVIDIA is absolutely taking off. Because it turns out that GPUs, the graphics processing, allow for many different things to be processed at the same time, which is great, as you could imagine, for something like AI that's trying to consider many different things. So Intel was left behind. Well, now we have kind of a plot twist that happens in 2025. First, the CEO that they brought in just a couple of years ago, he's out. Intel now brings in Lip-Bu Tan, industry veteran, is an investor, is a former Intel director, and he becomes the CEO back in March. Well, his first message was ultimately that Intel was going to cut the bureaucracy, speed up engineering, and spend where customers commit to buying from them. Less build it and they will come, and more when they come, we'll build it. Is this the best plan? Well, we're not really sure yet. Ultimately, just recently, the government, the US government, converted that CHIPS Act money, that $10.9 billion, into equity. So essentially, the US government will become one of the largest stakeholders of Intel, owning about 10% of the company. SoftBank came in and said they were putting in about $2 billion. So these are likely to add some confidence to investors. This gives them a bit more of a piggy bank to work with. But Intel's already had cash. They've been a big player for a long time. They already had a decent amount of cash. And overall, the analyst consensus is that the money that the government gave them, which they already expected to get, the money that SoftBank has given to them, the cash that they already had, this isn't going to be enough to build the facilities that they need to catch up. They are trying to play catch up on the rest of the world, on the rest of the quality of chips. That's going to take years. Is that possible? Well, I would imagine that having the US government behind them is likely to be both strategically a good thing and probably financially a good thing. But that's where we are now. Intel remains huge. Their factories, their engineering experience, their IP, they've got the history, they've got the pedigree, or let's say they had the pedigree to compete with the best chips in the world, but they're no longer unchallenged. Two levers will ultimately decide the next chapter for Intel. First, can they competitively ship the next generation of PC and server chips on time? Ryzen and Apple keep pushing data centers and AI-ready platforms forward, and Intel's been largely left behind. Can they get on board with that? Second, can they make the manufacturing of these chips work economically, either by packing Intel's own chips with the best-in-class transistors, or by filling the fabs with paying foundry customers on 18A and whatever the next generations that they come up with? Under the new CEO, Lip-Bu Tan, well, The dial's set for customer first and speed last. The chips money is now money that was ultimately came with an equity investment. So there's certain strings there. Will it work? Well, the end isn't written yet. AMD is a fierce competitor in CPUs. NVIDIA is a fierce competitor in the AI accelerator space. Apple defines laptop efficiency. TSMC, or Taiwan Semiconductor, is still the leading contract manufacturer, which is what Intel's talking about doing. But Intel does have deep pockets. They now have the government behind them. They have some big banks behind them. They have world-class engineers. And in a history of comebacks, it is very possible that the Intel brand could come back, but we're years away from knowing that for sure. So if we are invested or considering investing in this company, this might be a long turnaround. Either way, I think that the lesson from Intel stands today. Yesterday's victory lap doesn't power tomorrow's breakthroughs. And as Andy Grove, the former CEO of Intel, once said, only the paranoid survive. You must bring forward the next generation of technology. So we'll see what Intel does next, but it's been an interesting road up to this point. Now, thank you so much for sticking with me all the way to the end of the video. I really do appreciate it. If you want to sign up to get access to the Investors Grow website, where we try to make it quicker and easier to analyze companies, value companies, find new investments, things like that, link in the description below. And thank you so much for sticking with me. I'll see you in the next video.